Can you describe what you have done so far in front of the FAO headquarters in right now?
So right now we are practically stationed right in front of the POW building. There's really a huge problem of food in their country, and that's why we are here.
Stop land grabbing! Stop land grabbing!
It's been a really drastic situation. So in IPTK, we firstly worked with food sovereignty in these places.
What has happened in the United States is a good example of what can happen in the rest of the world if we follow the system.
So what is digital agriculture? Steal the data of farmers. Does a Bill Gates know how to farm? No. Does a Microsoft know how to farm? No, they know nothing. But they track the farmer, and Gates was placing in farmers' homes in Andhra Pradesh.
We have to also take into account that in family farming, most farmers are women. They may be invisible, but the majority of the agricultural production in this country is done by women.
They have to cut forest and damaging the biodiversity and putting out from their territories our sisters and brothers from indigenous communities.
That despite the lockdown and also travel restriction, the corporate does not stop. They continue with their project, with their plantation, with their mining, continue to take away our resources.
Those who receive food allowance still struggle to around the healthy or nutrition foods. Price of food in Hong Kong, whether in market or supermarket, are very expensive and continue to increase.
The Palestinian people are mainly deprived of having agricultural inputs, seeds, seedlings, and even water security being one of the main problems that the brothers in Syria suffer from, our brethren in the occupied territories suffer.
Since the rural peasants movement in Venezuela, we have been organizing our peoples, our communities, to see how we can produce and how we can manage our own food production.
Ito po yung maliit na lupang sinasaka namin. Sa ngayon po ay 2,500 square meters na lang o katumbas ng 1/4.
Failed, to increase the incomes of smallholder farmers. It has failed by, polluting and contaminating the environment.
Negotiation should be focused the betterment of the small scale fisheries.
Once again, please note your comments, ideas, and questions on the chat box for those joining us in Zoom, and comment section for the people and colleagues who are joining us on the Facebook and YouTube. We look forward to those comments and questions and thought-provoking, intellectually stimulating and energizing discussion. So before we formally begin the program, let us watch this short video prepared by the Global People's Summit Secretariat. So can we have the video, please?
We can go ahead, Ajay, with the next segment.
Great, great. Thank you so much. To start off, let me introduce our first speaker for the opening remarks. She is the Executive Director of IBON International. IBON International has since long been working on issues related to the neoliberal trade and investment regime and its impact on people's rights and sovereignty. IBON International is also one of the 22 organizations that is co-organizing the Global People's Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Ms. Jennifer Malonzo. Let us give her a warm welcome and applause. And Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ajay. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. Warm greetings of solidarity from us in IBON International. To all the organizing committee members who are here, the participating organizations, our allies, and also our participants in this side event of the Global People's Summit on Food Systems, or GPS for short, on the theme of people's food sovereignty. The people's food sovereignty is a key pillar for us in the GPS. A food system could approach our goal of being just, equitable, healthy, and sustainable if and when the toiling food producers control what, when, how, and for whom they produce food. We are talking about orienting food production systems to be appropriate to ecological, social, economic, and cultural needs. In the bigger picture, we are talking about asserting the people's leadership over economic life. The control of monopoly capitalists and finance capital, including the corporate capture of the United Nations Food Systems Summit processes, attack people's rights on food sovereignty. The GPS has been firmly opposing the exploitative, corporate, and elite power since day one from the beginning. So working for food sovereignty entails resistance to corporate control, from land grabbing and land monopoly to trade and investment rules that destroy local food production, to corporate techno-fixes and even the state repression which target rural people's collective actions. When we fight to strengthen our local food systems, practice agroecology, fight for land and peasant rights, we exercise our sovereign will over our resources and our food. And when we fight for food sovereignty, we work to radically transform food systems, and thus for a world where the people do not have to live under landlessness and hunger, or fear militarism and repression when they assert their right to land, food, and justice. In this way, our session today on people's food sovereignty is really closely linked with the other thematic sessions of the GPS today. So we are looking forward to hear stories of collective efforts, struggles, and of course, very importantly, victories of communities asserting food sovereignty in the global South, from West Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Africa. We will also discuss concrete action plans to further advance food sovereignty and the radical systemic transformation we want through people's campaigns. Finally, when we are talking about food sovereignty, we are talking about power, and our work to build the power of the people continues through supporting the movements and organizations fighting for their right over their resources, their food systems, and their development. Long live international solidarity, and thank you. Welcome also to this session.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your powerful opening remarks. Genuinely wish that we are able to rebuild people's power. Thanks for your solidarity. Now, let me also welcome on all of your behalf our first input speaker. She will give us an overview on food sovereignty and the United Nations Food System Summit. She is Azra Talat Saeed. She is the Executive Director for Roots for Equity, an organization working for the rights of small and landless farmers that include the rights of women farmers and agriculture workers. She is currently the chairperson for the Asia Pacific Research Network, APRN. APRN is also one of the 22 co-organizers of the Global People Summit. I would also like to commend our colleagues from the Roots of Equity and PKMT for a very impactful event that they organized during the opening summit of the Global People Summit yesterday. They mobilized 40 farmers to join us the program yesterday. And if you missed the opening program yesterday, you can still watch it via GPS Facebook page. So without any further ado, I welcome Azra Talat Saeed. Azra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ajay, so much. Good evening from Pakistan, and a good day to everybody who is here, and a very warm congratulations for the excellent events that people have been holding, not only online, but many of us are now also able to hold face-to-face physical meeting, which is a joy after many, many months of not seeing the people who are so dear to us in building our movements, in fighting corporate control over our lives and our lands. So I'm very happy to be here with all of you, and I've been asked to talk about food sovereignty. And again, food sovereignty is a context, is a movement, is in essence for many of us in the Asia Pacific, our lives every second of the day. So to be more concrete, what is the context of food sovereignty? It is right after the formation of the World Trade Organization and a very clear blueprint emerging of corporate control to be unleashed over the people of the world, especially the small and landless farmers, the fisher folk, the indigenous people, the small producers across the world, and in the third world countries, in the so-called post-colonial countries. Very quickly, the farmers' movements started coming together, and I know that many of the Asian movements worked very hard to build a very thorough understanding, a peoples-based, a farmers-based understanding of what we meant by food sovereignty. As we know, even to this day, the context is very correct, that there is rising hunger. There has been constant rising hunger amongst, especially the rural communities across the world, and the pandemic has made it very, very, it has exacerbated the situation, just left and right. And the conflict that has been happening, especially in Asia, whether it is parts of Kashmir, or it is the Philippines, or it is Palestine, and now Afghanistan, the situation of the rural people and the urban poor has just gone downhill extremely. And of course, you also know that the constant use of fossil fuel-based industrialization has resulted in extreme climate emergencies. The UNF, whatever that agency is called, has now gone from climate change to climate crisis to climate to climate emergency. And we know that COVID-19 also has made it much, much worse. So what we really need to do is to make sure, and what we have been doing for the past 20 years, is to keep on raising the level of our movement so that the people's voices, the people's presence in demanding our rights for food and agriculture, for all resources, productive resources, must be heard. And the to put all of this together, the word food sovereignty has been used, which is, in essence, a very, very complex, but a very simple idea. And I will get into it in a minute. But we know that right now, world over, small producers are now being more and more pushed into a corporate-driven agriculture system. Big farms, or as they're calling it, big agriculture, is taking over in forms of plantations and industrial farms. We also know, like in Pakistan, that there is a huge onslaught on land as well as on livestock as well. You know, we have talked about the TRIPS agenda in context to seeds and for many years, but now we see that there is a very new form of genetic control, and that is now on livestock. We know very well that who is behind this. It is the big corporations, the mega corporations, the very, very grotesque octopus-styled corporations who are responsible for this manipulation. We know that only 4 top corporations hold 60%, 67% of seeds worldwide. Similarly, 90% of grain trade is being carried out only by 4 corporations, and top 10 of top 100 are responsible for food and beverage processing, and so on. So the data keeps going on, which is now very clear that we are very much in a grip of dependence on corporate control resources and corporate agriculture. The neoliberal policies across trade and finance, especially through the WTO and other free trade agreements, have created a stranglehold on people's lives. And we know that corporate agriculture and climate change, all of this is responsible for where we stand today. So what have we said? We have said we will not fall up. We will not remain enslaved to this corporate control agenda. And the People's Movement has built a extremely amazing pathway for liberation. We believe that the rights of the community and people has to be decided by them in food and agriculture. Nobody else can decide how we want to produce our food, how we want to do agriculture in our countries. And so that is the very first basic right. It is the political right over decision making, and that is held by the people. We uphold the peasants' right to land and productive resources, and that is a very critical demand for us as well. The resources, the land, the livelihood is ours, and the way to that is genuine agrarian reform, where we do not allow them to give us piecemeal land, to keep on doing this carrot and stick thing that they can give us a couple of acres here or there. No, we want total control over our productive resources. And of course, we totally agree to the human rights agenda for food for all. But this is not food produced by the corporation, which is extremely toxic, it's extremely unhealthy. And so we want the right to produce through sustainable methods of agriculture, through what we now call agroecological methods, which in the years before we used to call traditional agriculture, which is based on very, very concrete people's science of ages and ages of experience of growing healthy, nutritious, sustainable food. Of course, people's food sovereignty also recognizes the rights of women, the small and landless women farmers, other small producers who are women. And so we, under the umbrella of food sovereignty, we talk about recognition and promotion of women's role in food production and their equitable access and control over productive resources. And we again have the demand that our livelihoods have to be decent livelihoods, which allow us dignified lives where we can give something, we can live a prosperous life where our children, our elderly, we ourselves are not constantly, held bound to the debt crisis, to the constant hunger that we face. So food sovereignty really provides many levels and has many contexts. It is based on advocacy. If those who really want to engage in government structures, who want to question and create systems which are more based on people's voices, it's a policy advocacy platform. For instance, if we engage at the UN level, if we go and engage with our governments, we can bring the agenda of food sovereignty to them and talk them through what our demands are. But to many of us, to the movements of the people, to the farmers' movements, to the women movements, the context of food sovereignty is direct action. It is all about fighting for our rights. This platform of food sovereignty acknowledges the right to fight for our rights. And I think that is the most empowering element, for me at least, for many of the farmers that are engaged in the fight for food sovereignty, that we stop acknowledging the governments which are really bloodthirsty, who have sold us and our lives and our lands and our resources to these capitalist, monopoly capitalists, especially the United States of America and other capitalist entities across the world. So, so we really believe that food sovereignty is part and parcel of the struggle for social justice and freedom. It's based on mass struggles, it's based on advocacy, and it is based on autonomous people's initiatives of direct action. For instance, across many parts of the world, farmers have gone and occupied land and have now started practicing very, very traditional agroecological-based food systems, which allow them not only a livelihood, but also very nutritious food for their people. In terms of preparing for the World Food System Summit in 2021, I would like to say that when we talked about, given in the context of food sovereignty, excuse me, let me just say this again. If you're talking about food sovereignty and the context of engaging with the United Nations World Food System Summit, the context is multi-stakeholder participation. And we know very well that that has not happened. There is no reference to the civil society, to the farmers, to the fisher folk, to rural people. And you know who they have appointed? They appointed somebody called Agnes Kalibata, who was the president of the Gates-funded Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, which is AGRA. And she is now the special envoy and has been appointed by the UN Secretary General to the World Food System Summit. And this is something which it's a very open declaration of divided lines. In a way, the UN and the multilateral institutions have said very clearly where they stand. In other instances, it was a bit more covert, this very unholy alliance between the so-called UN agencies and the corporations. But I think since the Agenda 2030 has come into place, this very, very hidden relationship is now very much out. And we know that the World Economic Forum has been pushing for public-private cooperation. It has, and in the past a year ago, I think they signed an agreement with the UN. The World Economic Forum signed a partnership with the UN, which is basically the basis for us saying that this is the corporate hijacking of the UN food system. Other agribusinesses that have been engaged in this very, very dirty business of allowing the corporations to rule our agriculture systems, our food systems, include Gates and Syngenta Foundations and other philanthropic capitalists. So, I mean, philanthropic is really a dirty word in the context of capitalism. And then we also have the CGIAR group, which is the so-called public research group on Global South. So we have these very humongous bodies that have come together and are now very concretely saying that we will allow the corporations to take control. They have given over our gene banks to the corporations. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Stockholm EAT, and the World Economic Forum have all put their efforts together in bringing together food system dialogues mechanism, which is just a sham. There is no people's voices in this whole series of global roundtable discussion that have been happening. So it really means that the UNFSS is nothing but the corporate agenda for the transformation of food systems for more profits, more and more profits. And this is why the people have shown that in a very few months, in this ongoing ravaging COVID-19 pandemic, all of this, the people have shown us that we will not actually sit down and stop it. The farmers' movement in India is such a beacon for us that, given what is happening in India in context to the COVID-19 situation, the farmers have not moved away. They have stood and fought for their rights. And that is the example that we see across our countries, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is countries of Africa, or it is the Philippines, even Palestine, with all that bombing that is happening in that part of the world, and the constant use of force by these corporations, the military industrial corporations, hand in hand with these so-called pesticide corporations. We know that the people have stood up and fought. And so with that, I would like to just finish and say that food sovereignty has been the basic blueprint for us to organize our farmers, to be able to systematically sit down with them and piece their lives in context to the trade liberalization agreements that have been happening at the national level, at the regional level, and international level. And from the very ground up, we have been able to push up thousands and thousands of farmers willing to stand up and fight, not only through mass action, but through direct action, even to the extent of believing in even more militant forms of liberation movements. And I think the work that we have done in Asia and the work that has been done to build the solidarity of movements across other nations, other continents, has allowed us today, 20 years almost after the formation of the WTO, to show them across the world. And I'm so inspired. I am so heartened. I'm so energized that we have been working round the clock, almost 20 hours, 22 hours a day for the past 5 days, but we still have the energy to take on more and more. And I think this is only because the farmers have stood up and said, this is our fight and we will do it. And if they are willing to fight, then of course, we are always shoulder to shoulder with our farmers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Azra, for giving us a splendid overview of why, despite we have enough food for each individual on this planet, global and current food systems have failed us. You also very brilliantly exposed the corporate agenda behind the United Nations Food System Summit. And I take this word from you that farmers and people's struggles for food sovereignty is the only pathway to sustainable, just, equitable, and a humane food system. So thank you so much for that. Now, Are we going to have a video from Sri Lanka? Do we have the video? Yeah.
This song is about rice farming in the village using traditional methods of using cows. The song says the cows help farmers to cultivate land. A good variety of rice seeds should be selected from our own village. After planting rice plants, proper water to be provided and continuous monitoring also necessary. After the harvest, we separate rice using local methods and self-access rice in the local market. The sales money should be saved with mother or women. The money will be useful for the next farming period in future.
மணப்பாறை மாடு கட்டி மாயவரம் ஏறு கூட்டி வயக்காட்ட உழுது போடு சின்ன கண்ணு பசும் தழைய போட்டு பாடுபடு செல்ல கண்ணு மணப்பாறை மாடு கட்டி மாயவரம் ஏறு கூட்டி மணப்பாறை மாடு கட்டி மாயவரம் ஏறு கூட்டி வயக்காட்ட உழுது போடு சின்ன கண்ணு பசும் தழைய போட்டு பாடுபடு செல்ல கண்ணு ஆத்தூரு கிச்சடி சம்பா ஆத்தூரு கிச்சடி சம்பா பார்த்து வாங்கி விதைச்சு ஆத்தூரு கிச்சடி சம்பா பார்த்து வாங்கி விதைச்சு நாட்டை பறிச்சு நட்டு போடு சின்ன கண்ணு தண்ணிய ஏத்தம் புடிச்சு இறச்சி போடு செல்ல கண்ணு நாட்டை பறிச்சு நட்டு போடு சின்ன கண்ணு தண்ணிய ஏத்தம் புடிச்சு இறச்சி போடு செல்ல கண்ணு கருத நல்லா விளைய வச்சு மருத சில்லாட வச்சு கருத நல்லா விளைய வச்சு மருத சில்லாட வச்சு அறுத்து போடு களத்து மேட்டுல சின்ன கண்ணு நல்லா அடிச்சு தூக்கி அளந்து போடு செல்ல கண்ணு என்றா பல்ல காட்ட அட தண்ணிய சேர்ந்து கருத நல்லா விளைய வச்சு மருத சில்லாட வச்சு அறுத்து போடு களத்து மேட்டுல சின்ன கண்ணு நல்லா அடிச்சு தூக்கி அளந்து போடு செல்ல கண்ணு பொதிய ஏற்றி வண்டியில பொள்ளாச்சி சந்தையிலே பொதிய ஏற்றி வண்டியில பொள்ளாச்சி சந்தையிலே விருதுநகர் வியாபாரிக்கு சின்ன கண்ணு நீயும் வித்து போட்டு பணத்தை எண்ணு செல்ல கண்ணு விருதுநகர் வியாபாரிக்கு சின்ன கண்ணு நீயும் வித்து போட்டு பணத்தை எண்ணு செல்ல கண்ணு ஏத்த பணத்தை சிக்கனமா செலவு பண்ண பக்குவமா அம்மா கையில கொடுத்து போடு சின்ன கண்ணு உங்க அம்மா கையில கொடுத்து போடு சின்ன கண்ணு அவங்க 600 ஆக்குவாங்க செல்ல கண்ணு.
Thank you so much, friends. This video has been shared to us by Human Development Organization in Sri Lanka, and we send them a lot of thanks from all the participants, and thank you to Azra too. Friends, we are now moving to a very important section of this session today. Our next set of presenters will share their stories of struggles and victories in fighting for food sovereignty. I shall introduce the speakers in the order of their presentation. Our first speaker is Mariam Ali Jaja from a Jordan-Palestine organization, the Arab Group for Protection of Nature, APN. APN is an independent non-profit organization concerned with the protection of the environment and natural resources of the Arab countries. It supports Palestinian farmers to reclaim their lands through its Million Tree campaign. The APN is also one of the 22 organizations that is co-organizing the Global People Summit. We are also fortunate to have a second speaker as Fabiana Sanchez. Fabiana Sanchez is a researcher, food educator, articulator of networks and movements in defense of tasty, healthy, and sustainable food. She's a member of the Banketico collective that organizes the campaign Gente pra Brihilar Now pra Moredo de Fame, translated closely into English, that is, people is made to shine, not to starve, to eradicate hunger and for food sovereignty in Brazil. She is part of the staff of the advocacy department of SEFRAS, Franciscan Solidarity Service, to act in the field of food practices, policies, and actions against hunger. Our third speaker is Nahendra Khadka, All Nepal Peasants Federation, ANPFP, ANFA Revolutionary Center. He was recently appointed as the Vice Chair of the National Land Commission of the Government of Nepal, an agency tasked to distribute lands to the farmers. He is also a member of the Asia Steering Council of the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, PCFS, and International Coordinating Committee member of the International League of People's Struggles. So now let's welcome Mariam Alijaja. Mariam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ajay. مرحبا جميعا. اسمحوا لي اليوم أتحدث في اللغة الإنجليزية. Hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak about our experience. First of all, we are very much honored to be part of this people-led struggle and virtual protest and towards justice and mainly justice in our food systems. As has been mentioned, the APN is one of the organizers of the People's Summit, and we are also very much honored to be part of this panel today. So, okay, so quickly, APN, or the Arab Group for the Protection of Nature, is an independent people's organization. We also refer to ourselves as a green resistance movement. We were established in 2003, and our main focus is enhancing sovereignty over food and natural resources. We have a big effort in building networks on the regional and the international level. We are part of the Arab Network for Food Sovereignty, and we are also part of the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty. But today I'm going to speak and focus on our experience regarding the Million Tree Campaign in Palestine, which is one of our main programs. APN's main message revolves around enhancing food sovereignty in areas impacted by conflict, war, and occupation. And as many of you have noticed, this theme, or this really important context is completely marginalized in the UNFSS deliberations. It is diluted and, of course, provided through a lens, through a corporate and through a lens which is was not created in participation with communities impacted by conflict, occupation, and war. So let me move into speaking about the Million Tree Campaign in Palestine. So our Million Tree Campaign started in the year 2000. It was the second intifada, where social movements have noticed that the Israeli occupation are systematically uprooting very old indigenous trees in Palestine. And it was at that point there was one tree uprooted per minute. There was a very obvious attack on land, on agriculture, on Palestinian farmers, and thus the campaign started under the slogan, "They uproot a tree, we replant 10." If you see our logo in front of you, there is an attachment between the trees and the communities, the Palestinian communities. So when the Israelis uproot these trees, they are trying to uproot peoples. And when we try to replant those trees, we are replanting people back into their lands. So the Israelis have uprooted around 3.5 million trees since the year 2000 up to today. And the aims are quite clear to us. So one is dismantling the agricultural sector in Palestine, which is one of the main, if not the most prominent economic sector in Palestine. Second is a use of food as a weapon against Palestinians and mainly rural populations who are really the reason to why people have preserved the lands so far. The third one is to try to cut and detach communities from their social, spiritual, and historical attachment or relationship to land, the value. And fourth was quite a very strategic and malicious end. So not a lot of you know, but the Israelis, they use violence, but also so-called or pretended legal basis to confiscate Palestinian lands. So what they did was, one of the old Ottoman laws in Palestine stated that if land is not cultivated for 3 years or 3 consecutive years, the state could take that land and provide it to other farmers, so other farmers can plant those lands. So the reason is for landlords to prevent landlords from accumulating land and try to enhance access to land. So what the Israelis did is they manipulated this law, and they said, if these lands are not cultivated for 3 consecutive years, the state, in this case, the occupying state, which is Israel, has the right to confiscate this land. But in this case, they confiscate this land for the Israeli occupation and for Israelis and for the expansion of Israeli settlements. So what we did is starting this Million Tree campaign. Here are some pictures from our campaigns. We started as a small movement which grew and incorporated many unions and civil society organizations in Palestine, but also it bridged Palestinians inside with refugees outside in the diaspora, but it also bridged regional and international organizations that are in solidarity. But what is really special and important about this movement is that it depends on memberships, the support that members give, and local and Arab funding. So we do not take conditional aid, we do not take foreign state funding to remain independent. And because we know that this is a green resistance struggle and may be impacted otherwise. So these are some pictures from our campaigns and our projects. We worked throughout Palestine, the entire of historic Palestine. As I've mentioned, they've uprooted 3.5 million trees. The Arab Group for the Protection of Nature, we were able to plant 2.5 million trees, and we're planning on finishing the 3rd million, inshallah, in the coming 1 year or 2 years. Here are some of the fruits of our campaigns. This is in Hebron, in Gaza, in Bethlehem. So our current campaign is to try to revive the major agricultural losses that were incurred on the agricultural sector in Gaza. So you are aware that Gaza has been under sanctions for over maybe 15 years now, and agricultural inputs are hindered. The entry of food imports is also stopped, exports also. So people are struggling with food insecurity and unemployment, and that's where the importance of the agricultural sector is really evident to people, because it's direct way that Palestinians in Gaza can remain steadfast against all of these, measures to try to politically strangle them or make them change their urge for freedom. So as you can see, there are $2 million in agricultural losses in less than I think in 1 week in May. A lot of these are, wheat fields that have been completely burnt. 50% of the beehives were completely destroyed from the fires and from the emissions. Plastic houses and water tanks and water infrastructure were targeted systematically. Plastic houses as well. You can see the pictures in front of you. Also, all the food production sites, the death of millions of birds. It was a very clear, systematic way to destroy the agricultural sector in Gaza. And that's why we initiated a campaign to restore and save the agricultural sector in Gaza. So if anybody is interested, please let us know. We've already started with our projects, and we plan on not ending, because we already had projects in Gaza, but now they are more intensified. So now I would like to speak a little bit about some of our Palestinian heroes, just to share with you some examples of who we see as icons, and there are many of them. But we were very, lucky to have met these Palestinian heroes. So one of them is Ibrahim Sbeih. He's a farmer from the town of Al Khadr in Beit Lahem. His land happens to be in the heart of a settlement called Afrat. The occupation has been exerting immense pressure on Ibrahim, burning his fields, poisoning his mule, stopping him physically, blocking the roads for him to enter his land. But he never ceased to go by foot and enter his land to be able to cultivate it and protect it. And they've also offered him $15 million, and he refused. So Ibrahim Sbeih was one of the famous farmers we invited to Jordan to try to bring justice to the cause and celebrate his heroism.
Mariam, I'm very sorry for interrupting you. We would like to hear you more, but right now, in the sake of time, I will request you to wind up in 1 minute or 1 minute and 30 seconds or so.
Okay, I will finish this in 30 seconds, and then I can put my video quickly. Yeah. So Abdurrahman Qasim is another farmer, also retrieved his land after 32 years of confiscation. He was offered $28 million and even US passports, American passports, to leave his land, and he completely refused to leave. So another one is Martyr Ziad. He was martyred while he was planting olive trees in Palestine. Of course, Jamila Manasra is an 85-year-old pastoralist from Beit Lahem. Jamila lived in a cave for 60 years consecutively. She and her husband, because she didn't want her land to be confiscated, which is adjacent to the cave. And may she rest in peace. She passed away last week, but she's an icon and a symbol of inspiration for all of us. And we think generation after generation, Palestine will really continue the struggle. So quickly, I will move to this, and which will be the final episode of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Maria. Let me bring our salute to Palestinian heroes on behalf of all the participants, and thanks also for bringing us your excellent agroecological response to the conflict and the attempts to dismantle food systems in Palestine. So thank you so much for that. All of us are sending you more energy to do this more and better. Thanks again. Now let me welcome our second speaker, Fabiana Sanchez from Brazil. Fabiana, you have the floor.
Hi there, Hi, greetings everyone. I'm Fabiana from Brazil, and today I will try to do my best to speak in English because the Portuguese translator didn't arrive at the panel, so I'll do my best, but it's not guaranteed. It's been 10 years that I'm full on national processes, and it's been 10 years that I'm not into international forums, so it's rusty my English. Well, I'm here to talk about the situation in Brazil, human rights, and during this syndemic state and social conjuncture to these days. So we are thriving through the chaos right now. And listen, pode passar. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to announce that our human rights, food human rights web of defense is making a huge and shiny job. All the many companions, Brazilian companions, have made an effort to strengthen the debate, international, mobilizing, realizing conference and audience, like this one with Michael Fakhri about food rights and food school programs that are being dismantled in Brazil, mostly from last year from now. Pode passar. Next. Well, here in Brazil, it's important to point out that unemployment, job precarization, and poverty is already on ascension before the pandemics. So we see in this graphic that from 2014 until now, it's been a rising of the situation through the transition of Dilma Temer transition, presidential government transition. So neoliberal agenda is on. Next. Next, please. Well, here in Brazil, the violations of food rights and food quality rights, it's tradition. Now, in 2020, more than a half of Brazilian population is or starving or under risk of starving. Yeah, thanks. Next. So, yes. Here we are in an intentional process of dismantle of consecrated public politics. Here in Brazil, the organizational culture from the government is that food rights as charity, not as right. So here we see a chart from the sequel of programs that are super well known all over the world, and the decreasing the disinvestment on these programs from 2014 until now. Yeah, we see that the bottom three of this chart is dedicated to rural and food farming practices, eco and agroecological investments on them. It's completely gone. Next. Before to move, it needs to be said that the government is not investing like here in the bottom. It's amazing how government disinvest on programs of such importance to produce food in the moment the population most need of these rights. During the moment of the population needs food support of the supply chain production. Next. It's amazing that I'm amazed. Well, here's a sequel of emergency politics for dealing with the poverty during the pandemics, all of them with lack of the universalidade, o princípio, violating the principle of universality of human rights and to protection. Next. We have many slides ahead. Here I see as a human rights violation the denial to social organizations to participate on the public agenda. So we're having difficulties in many levels of the participants, councils. They are not doing their job. They exist, they are very specially hardworking people, but they're not being listened, recognized as a task force to provide information and resources to operate together and thrive. Next. Well, as a Franciscan person in the world and now belonging to a Franciscan organization, we have determined that, and the Brazilian civil society have been determined through the years, but mostly since last year from now, to embrace definitely the process of construction of food sovereignty systems. Né? So the struggles to fight hunger here in Brazil is getting stronger, and we are seeing the constructions of many new coalitions, important ones, like a National Coalition Against Hunger, Franciscan Coalition Against Hunger. It's an internal organization process, and many others. And we see more clearly the structural and emergency pillars that sustain hunger. And we are self-determined to act on both and organize ourselves better in order to get more results. So this is a good news, right? Next. So since last year, CEFRAs have been producing many processes in order to think about the next steps, and they are providing resources to mobilize and act on an agenda of fight hunger on these 4 pillars: participation and mobilization through the coalitions, enhancing of the coalitions and platforms or exchange information, popular organization in the level of solidarity webs on the base of society. And here I'm speaking in a metropole, but we are organized in other states and cities as well. And consolidate good information to incidence in English, to do advocacy better. And this is a very important pillar for us now. And united, enhance political action in the affirmative agendas to fight hunger and poverty, and we strengthen each other. Next. Yeah, we are now based on the call from Papa Francisco through Laudato Si. It's a convocatory, national global convocatory to rethink on our values. And Francisco and Clara also remind us of these values. So the purpose of relift the values of our economy. Next. Based on that, we are producing knowledge to strengthen of popular organization. This too is going to be launched in this next semester. Next. Next, please. We are finishing. Now, good news on our food-based community actions. We are strengthening the network for distribution, popular society, civil societies network to distribute cestas básicas, these emergency kits in order to provide. See, on my left are the conventional ones, commodity ones, and now we see the rising of to strengthen the emergency kits, agroecological kits. Next. This is relevant because we strengthen global nice food systems through solidarity. We are been calling this as redes doadoras, giving networks that show the new paths to new short chains of commercialization. So we have three main examples here. They collect money from people and buy from farmers, local farmers, agroecological one, and arrange these kits to provide for the vulnerable. So we are providing organic, high quality food to vulnerable people. Redes doadoras mean giving networks, the networks that organize themselves in order to help the agriculture agenda in one hand, and in the other distribute food for those who needs. We are saying redes doadoras, this phenomenon. Next. It's not only donation, but it involves donation indeed. Well, here the community kitchens is doing a great, beautiful, tasty, full of love job, independently from supports, much supports, and public politics to enhance their operations. Is very inspirational, and they are getting stronger through chaos and difficulties. Next. I think from this is going to be new restaurants and new income basis structures. Well, food farming, permaculture, and co-ops, cooperatives, community cooperatives rising. It's a new youth, young solidarity movement going on, uniting people from the kitchens, gastronomy, services, and it's really beautiful what's going on. But they need support in order to deal with use of land space, cooperative disputes on demand. Next, finishing. Next, please. Time's up. Okay. Well, and systematic support from the mobilization from Via Campesina and other movements, engaging the two agendas. And this is a very beautiful initiative. We are calling this the food trials. So we are doing a symbolic trial in order to establish new responsibilities and understand and giving voice to the Brazilian people who are hunger victims. So we are doing this in order to study a new agenda for mobilization for rights. So it's a very beautiful thing to do in your countries. Next, please. Well, this is my contacts, and if you would like to know more about these methodologies, we are happy to comply. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fabiana, for sharing your struggle with us. We used to take a lot of pride and inspiration from Brazilian people's struggle against poverty and for ensuring food security, but it's saddening to see that the situation has become worse now. But thanks for your inspiring presentation, and all of us send you our solidarity for your effort and the struggle. I would like to remind participants on the Facebook and YouTube that if you have any question, write them into the comment section. Participants on Zoom, they can write their questions in the chat box. And for people who have raised their hands, just hold your horses a bit till we have our third speaker, and then we will open the floor. So let us welcome our third speaker, Nahendra Khadka from Nepal. Nahendra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ajay. First of all, I would like to thank the PCFS team and all the organizers for inviting me in this great event. We are fighting on behalf of the peasants of Nepal for peasant rights, food sovereignty, land reform, agrarian revolution, and social justice for a long time, along with our struggle for democracy. In context of Nepal, from 1951, when formally All Nepal Peasant Association was formed, we started the struggle for the land to right to land, that is land reform, and that is also under the slogan of land to the tillers. The Peasant Association at that time had mainly two slogans: power to the oppressed people, power to the people, and land to the tillers. So from that historical point, we developed our organizational movement along with the democratic movement, because there was many coups and attempt of coups, even dictatorships, the panchayat regime, single party panchayat regime, which allowed not to speak, not to organize, not to have our own voice freely. So in 1990s, when Soviet Union was collapsed, but in Nepal, collectively with some bourgeois forces, bourgeois democratic forces, left forces united the peasant people's movement, and some certain democratic rights were restored, under which we could organize, speak, and mobilize people. With this struggle of democracy and freedom, a lot of peasants have sacrificed their life for the establishment of democracy. But the establishment and restoration of so-called democracy was also not a complete process. So people have had to start a new struggle from 1996 in Nepal, with 10 years people's struggle, especially in the peasants' leadership, where the main backbone of the struggle was the peasantry. We fought against the unjust system, and we abolished monarchy, and we restored democracy, and we established constitutional assembly, constituent assembly by election. During this process, we promulgated one interim constitution in which, in the history of Nepal, for the first time, we institutionalized food sovereignty as a people's fundamental right. So peasant federation, peasant associations, organizations fought for a long battle for the recognition of the food sovereignty as a people's right in the constitution. So even in that process also, there were a lot of obstacles, obstructions. People used to say, if we kept the provision of food sovereignty as a right of the people, people will sit at their home and they will demand food. And a poor country, a poor state like Nepal cannot fulfill their demand, and all the leaders, all the people who are in the government, who are in the parliament, would be taken into the custody and sent to the jail. So the bourgeois forces, the anti-people forces, anti-peasant forces created such rumor in such a way that we had to have a next battle to overcome it and to reestablish this right into our new constitution that we formulated in 2015. So from a people's battle, people's struggle, especially centered at the peasants movement, led by the peasants, championed by the peasants, we could have established food sovereignty again into our 36 of this new constitution. Right to food, food sovereignty, and food security are kept as the people's fundamental right. Even while writing these also, people wanted to keep just the right to food. People wanted to keep just the food security, but they tried their best not to include food sovereignty. In the second Constitutional Assembly election, the People's Force, the pro-people force, the revolutionary force was a little bit weakened. So they tried their best from the core of their heart and mind, but we defeated them, and we kept these rights as our fundamental right. But to implement these rights, we had to make acts. We had to make bylaws. Firstly, people even from the so-called left parties, which later on proved not to be left. In the left, they carried the pathway of rightist and dictatorial way. They were not interested to promulgate the act. Firstly, we resisted it. We made a huge demonstration, a struggle, lobbying, advocacy. So collectively, the peasant organizations of different political parties unified and have a single voice in favor of Food Sovereignty Act. So they were compelled to bring the act, especially the Prime Minister himself, who dissolved the parliament for 2 times against the constitution. He was not interested in that way. So the People's Force, revolutionary forces, pro-people forces made a long struggle to promulgate a new act. So they were compelled to form an act related to food. But they were not interested to keep the concept of food sovereignty. So they were again spreading the similar humor among the people that if we keep food sovereignty as the people's fundamental right, people will stay at home, they will sleep on their bed, and they will demand food. And when we could not distribute food, we have to go to the jail. They will take us into the custody according to the new law. They created the rumor in the next round. We again defeated their voice. So what they tried, they had to keep a bill in Nepal before endorsement from the parliament. It is called bill. And when it is endorsed by the parliament, it is called act. So in the bill, they kept the name as Food Sovereignty Act, bill. But in the name of the act, the word food sovereignty and the concept of food sovereignty was removed. We had to have a new kind of battle again, even in the parliamentary committees, with the ministry, at the cabinet level. And again, we could have achieved the Bay Act in the name of Act for Right to Food and Food Sovereignty and Food Security as well.
And
so,
Nahendra, sorry to interrupt you, but can we request you to wind up and say 60 to 90 seconds so that we can move over?
Okay. So after that, they had to formulate a bylaw and they were not interested. So after the dissolution of the second round of the parliament, people protested. The previous government was removed by the parliament. A new government has been formed. It is trying to incorporate the concept of food sovereignty with the concept of land reform. So the government has again formed a National Land Commission, and fortunately, I'm appointed as the vice chairperson of that commission as well. That is provided the authority for the redistributive land reform to provide land to the tillers. And the new government has made a commitment for establishing food sovereignty, implementing food sovereignty, but our struggle continues. So the experience of Nepal is that whether the forces are so-called left or right, we have to keep on watching on them. We have to keep on acting as watchdog for them. And the peasants, the pro-people forces, peasant organizations have to work to make their rights assured, not only in constitution, not only in laws and bylaws, but for the implementation of this process as well. This could be some of the experience that what can happen even after the constitutionalization of the food sovereignty. These are certain experience from Nepal. So I think there may be some lessons for other peasant movements around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nahem. We know and we believe that it's been a gigantic struggle by people, peasants, farmers, and others in Nepal to be able to enshrine food sovereignty in your constitution. And we are sure that many of us will take inspiration from that struggle. So thanks to all the speakers, Mariam, Fabiana, Nahend, to everyone who just joined. You are tuned into our webinar, Asserting Food Sovereignty, Transforming Food Systems. This is one of the side events of the Global People Summit on Food Systems for the second day of our 3-day counter summit to the UN Food System Summit. This is organized by People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, together with Asia Peasant Coalition, Roots for Equity, IBON International, Asia Pacific Research Network, Arab Group for the Protection of Nature, and the Arab Network for Food Sovereignty. Please know that we are also streaming this event on live on Facebook on the Global People Summit on Food System. Links to the live streams will be shared in the chat. Thank you so much to the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation for helping us stream this event. The floor is now open for your comments and questions. to all of our speakers. May I request all the speakers to turn on your videos. For people who want to ask questions and give comments, please be brief, briefly introduce yourself, and be brief in terms of your question so that we might be able to share this opportunity with many people who might want to comment or question. So the floor is open. Two people have raised their hands. Just give me a moment so that I can identify who has raised his hand. Because of, yeah. I am unable to see people who are raising their hand. Can somebody help? Gail, maybe you can help with. I see a hand raised by Adzakia Siaida.
Yeah.
Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Go ahead,
I'm,
ask your questions.
okay. Yeah, I'm Askia from Indonesia, and I want to ask for the panelists, how can food sovereignty be further advanced? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can take a few questions and panelists can answer them together. I see a hand raised from Julio Quanteras. Julio, go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm calling from the village of Huchin here in the San Francisco Bay Area in the unceded territory of the Ohlone people in California. And my question is revolving around the youth and inspiring the youth, and that being the next generation of farmers, of peasants. And so, Fabiana, I thought it was inspiring what you mentioned as far as how the youth are organizing and growing food and forming these new solidarity spaces. And so I, wanted to ask what the name of those groups were so we can follow them on social media, but then also for the other presenters, wondering how, what is done to incorporate the youth and how can we do that a better job at that?
Thanks, Julio. We take another question from Shanti Behra. Shanti, please go ahead, ask your question. Shanti, can you hear us? Please go ahead and ask your question. Shanti Behra. Okay, I think we have lost Shanti Behra, or she's not able to ask her question because of some reasons. You can also write your questions in the chat box. Okay, now going back to the panelists, I think one question was addressed to Fabiana. So Fabiana, maybe you can go ahead, answer that question, and then I'll go.
I will do it. Okay. Thank you, Julio, for your remark. Yes, it's very neat to inspire the youth and the intergenerational relations, because here we are connecting the youth, but the older generations are super hardworking solidarity people, and this union of generation are inspiring everybody to thrive and to make change. Né? So, about the list of change makers, everybody here got a subscription, so I will do a list of change makers and web profiles for you to follow. But here is Periferia Viva, Ocupação 9 de Julho, Cefras, they're all shining. And we are organizing the National Coalition for Fight for Hunger, against hunger. And there we're going to create a website, fomebr.org, to give all the information for the people, find each other and know what's happening, like a news portal about the hunger mobilization fight.
Thanks, Fabiana. I believe there was also a question on food sovereignty. So before I go to Azra and request her to answer that question, I would also like to ask Nahendra and Mariam if you want to respond briefly to any of the question. Please do so now. Nahendra, Mariam.
Yes, Ajay, a question is there, how is the land distribution for land reform in Nepal progressing now as well, by Victor? So previous government had formed one commission, but it had not the intention to distribute land, but to have a politics of land distribution. So yesterday also I was in the field to get the information and update about the work of the previous commission. And I found zero work at the field level. So that also was a great feedback for me as a vice chairperson, newly appointed vice chairperson of the National Land Commission. We have made a plan to have a land distribution to categorizing 3 categories. One, the Dalit landless people. Secondly, the landless people of all the communities, all other communities. And the third one are those people who have already occupied the land, who are already cultivating the land, but they do not have the land entitlement certificate and the right of ownership. So we will categorize these 3 things. Firstly, we will prioritize the Dalit landless people because they are called so-called Dalits and they are treated as untouchable by the Hindu culture, the feudalistic culture of the history. So distributing land to the landless Dalit is a process of making them and recognizing them as human beings. So we will prioritize them to the foremost level, the first level. Secondly, the landless people of all other communities are at least human beings, but they are not citizens of Nepal because when you don't have land entitlement paper, you cannot get citizenship card, you cannot have passport, and you cannot have many things. You cannot be recognized as the citizen of Nepal. So for all other people to provide land and to provide land entitlement paper is a process of making them citizens. And the third ones, people who are already occupying the land, they are cultivating the land, they have small huts, small sheds or other things. At least they are cultivating their field, they are taking their production, selling in the market or having themselves, but they don't have land entitlement paper. That means they also cannot get citizenship and other things. So that is when people have already occupied the land and cultivating the field, when they get land entitlement paper, they will be transformed into people of at least recognizable level. That means the stage of prosperity begins from there. So we have categorized this process as making people humans from inhuman untouchability and poverty, making people recognized dignified citizen in the next category, and the third one to make them prosperous. But we are in the coalition government. So we cannot implement the concept, or complete concept of socialist orientation, but we are trying our best to move towards that, for which we will follow the principle of food sovereignty, agrarian reform, the genuine agrarian reform with land reform. We will prioritize local production, local consumption. Previous government had opened foreign direct investment in agriculture. So we are struggling against that. We want not to open our agriculture sector for foreign direct investment. We don't want to make our agricultural sector is the playground of foreign companies, multinational companies. So we are integrating the concept of land reform and land distribution with the concept of food sovereignty, and we are moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Nahind for your very reassuring response and remarks. Over to you, Azra. There are two questions in the chat box. Victor is saying that food sovereignty is multifaceted and all avenues are valid as shown in the different strategies. What do you think is the most important and what is overarching? There is another question from Lola Kabnal. She wants to ask, what are you going to do with the results of these series of actions? Is there a proposal for decision makers? What is going to be done at the Climate Change Summit? And what is the inclusion of women in the process? So over to you, Azra. Thanks.
Thank you. Those are two very long questions, but I will just take up Victor's question first. As I said during my intervention, I think the most critical aspect of food sovereignty for us in Pakistan, where we had no farmers movement in essence when about 20 years ago, for us, we found that the whole context of food sovereignty allowed us to have the space for farmers to start understanding their rights. In countries like Pakistan, which are very dictatorial, the whole issue of land rights had gone off the agenda of all farmers. They would not ask for land. It was just amazing for us to go from one community to the other and find that there's no demand for land rights, for genuine agrarian reforms, because a series of very, very feudal governments and then a very strong a very, very distorted Islamic government had taken away this concept that farmers are the real owners of land and all productive resources. So that the umbrella which food sovereignty provided for movements to start thinking of their rights, that was very critical for us. But in the long term, I think the context of direct action is very, very important and is actually the base of fighting for food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is not going to happen if we stand there peacefully with a placard. We keep on saying, please give us our land, please give us our land. We actually will have to go and take the land, and that is direct action. And that takes a lot of courage and strength on part of the farmer movements. And food sovereignty provides that political space for discussion, for mobilizing, for engaging in political discussions, for bringing up the issue of colonization again. Why are we so colonized in our mindset and not even asking for our rights? And so because food sovereignty always builds on colonization, it does not start from the current neoliberal era. It starts from the very basis of our bonding, of our bondage to these bloody feudals, that I think it is a very, very empowering tool for movements to go further. The second question actually kind of rolls into this issue. Every mobilization that we have, whether it is for the UNFSS or for all the WTO ministerials that happen now and then, or for our own World Hunger Day, the 16th of October, each one of them actually mobilizes more men and women. It mobilizes more youth and children. We have young kids now in our movements in Pakistan who will stand up and say, land to the tiller. And that is how we need to build our movements. It has to keep on engaging more and more sectors of our society. It has to be the youth, it has to be the health practitioners, it has to be academics and teachers. And because food sovereignty gives that space, when we talk about health, immediately you can go to the allied health professionals, to the nurses, to the doctors. You can go to the lawyers because there is a whole advocacy context to this. And you can go and say, where does the Constitution of Pakistan says that we can't have land? And so we can question the entire basis of our so-called government status and bring in the legal frameworks. So I think because there is space for all of that, for the more so-called reformist actions and activists who really do not engage in militant action, who really do not engage in mobilizing our forces on the ground and are more interested in talking about peaceful means of taking up these issues. There is space for that as well. People are not angered to the extent that everybody wants to start taking up the anti-imperialist agenda immediately. So I think you coax people into seeing what is actually at hand. Today in the morning, there was a webinar where they asked me, we can't have violence. The word violence is now so mixed up with asking for your rights. The violence of the Americans is never talked about. The violence of the military-industrial complex is not talked about. The violence of pesticides is not talked about. But every time the people stand up to ask for the demands, we say they are being violent. So I think food sovereignty gives us space to unpack all those words which the neoliberal agenda, the monopoly capitalists have thrown into the rights framework. The human rights workers are so caught up in the American human rights context that the food sovereignty rights framework is very broad, and it allows us to be very complex and very simple in how we work with our communities. I hope I did answer that. On women, it's amazing. It's amazing how much of women groups have been mobilized in my country, where women cannot even come out of their homes because of parda and very feudal context of women's places in society. There's been a recent fight on livestock in Pakistan. The corporate sector, especially Nestle and the Australians and the Americans, are trying to now colonize our germplasm in livestock. After the seeds debacle, it's now the turn for livestock. And livestock is very much women's, livestock is their children. They really look after the livestock as if they would look after their own children. And women are up in arms. It's amazing to me how quickly we have been able to mobilize women across the country on the issue of livestock. So, if you have that context, if you're clear in how the corporate sector is grabbing your resources and you can make the links known to the people, you can show them how the World Bank is encroaching into the lives. Why don't we have gas? Why don't we have electricity? Why can't our children go to school? Why we have no transport? And you link it to these institutions of monopoly capitalism. Then women are really angry because they will fight for their families more than they will fight for themselves. So I think women are now so motivated. I feel I can retire now, There are many more women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azra. I think you have already also answered the question asked by Chatu in the chat. How can food sovereignty be advanced? So you have already answered that. Now we have two more hands raised, Atama Katama and Sakiul Millat Morshed. So we will ask you to ask your questions. There are also a few questions in the chat box. Because of the scarcity of time, we won't be able to take up all the questions, but do keep sending your questions, and I'll request all the panelists to have a look at the chat boxes and respond to those questions and comments also. So let's take two of our last questions, Atama Katama and then Sakiul Millat Morshid. Atama?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ajay. I have a question here for all the speakers, but realize that there is a time constraint. So I'm thinking, since the start of our global campaign, we have voiced our demands, and it has been picked up by influencers like Russell Brand, who has spoken out about the billionaires like Bill Gates. He has also exposed agendas of the billionaires in big tech, billionaires, arm dealers, and other industrial corporate cartels' interests. You know, as the peoples of the North are also speaking about this very strongly since we start the campaign, how can we further advance the food sovereignty struggle, knowing that the global North and the North is now together in the global struggle? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Atama. Sakil, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Murshid from Bangladesh. My question is actually to the friend from Nepal. First of all, thank you for sharing your long and hard journey to establish this food sovereignty in your constitution. I just want to know that does that mean that by constitution now your agriculture is, I mean, in Nepal, the agriculture would be agroecology, will practice all over. Agroecology means that it would be free from this pesticide and GMOs.
Thanks, Morshid. Thanks, Morshid. Now I'll come back to the panelists, three of you, Azra, Nahind, and Fabiana in that order. So I'll request you to be brief and respond in maybe 40 seconds, 45 seconds. Azra, starting with you.
Sorry, Ajay, respond to what?
To the question and the comment.
I'm really sorry, I'm lost. Which question and comment?
I mean, Atama commented about our hashtags and taglines being taken up by celebrities, and that has done well to advance our cause on that. And also the question from Morshid. Maybe if you don't...
I am not a very...
your final word.
I don't know much about this. I'm sorry. I'm not a very internet kind of a person. Ajay, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Your last message in 30 seconds, anything that you would like to add to what you have already said? Any last word on how to advance people's struggles on food sovereignty? You have always spoken, but if you think you want to add anything in 30 seconds.
I think we need to build our communities much more in mobilization than what we have done as yet. And we need to make sure that the message of food sovereignty is not co-opted as it is being co-opted in other parts of the world. For us, food sovereignty is direct control over our land and resources. It is our right to make decisions on agriculture and food, and not imperialist organizations like the WTO or whoever wants to arrive in our countries thinking that they can take away our land, take away our resources. And that is the only answer to food sovereignty. It is total independence from colonial and neo-colonial imperialist impositions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nahind, over to you.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you for the questions. The first thing some comrades had asked how the Food Sovereignty Act will help the farmers, and Morsid's question is about agroecology. In our Act for Right to Food, Food Sovereignty, and Food Right to Food and Food Sovereignty, there are different articles, different provisions that protect, that defend the peasants' rights of the seeds and breeds, classification of peasants according to based on the ownership and their production system. There are provisions about their social security and others. So in this way that protects our farmers. Regarding agroecology also, in that act, it is clearly mentioned about adoption of the eco-friendly agriculture and agroecology as well. So implementation of that act could be a good option for the peasant, though not so much radically, not so much radical, but at least from the parliamentarian politics, what we can achieve, there are a lot of points in that. Secondly, there is a question by Soto, how we can develop advanced food sovereignty, and there was a question about hashtagging. Now, food sovereignty as a movement, as a concept, as a theory and practice, especially theory, it has become a brand. So all lot of celebrities, as our comrade said, are adopting this concept for name. So they want to utilize this name to fame their celebrity, celebrityhood. So advancement of food sovereignty has certain things. For an example, peasantry is a shrinking class, whether under the capitalism or under the socialism. Peasantry is a shrinking class. In capitalism, the peasants will be either be rich peasants, capitalists, and will move ahead in a limited number, and more of the peasants will be wealthless and will be propertyless and will be everything without anything. So under socialism, peasantry will be transformed into a working class. So as a shrinking class, food sovereignty is an option to develop the peasant movement in a broader way, because there may be less peasants, but there are each and every people, human being on this earth, eats food. So food sovereignty is a concept of connecting each and
sorry
every...
to interrupt you.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we would like to close this session soon. So if you can wind up quickly.
Okay.
Thanks.
So it is a concept of connecting peasants movement to the movement of food and to each and every human being of this earth. And advancement of food sovereignty is a concept of connecting food sovereignty to the concept of, to the theory and practice of scientific socialism. As our comrade said, many celebrities want to be connected with food sovereignty, want to adopt our hashtag movements, but they don't want to speak on scientific socialism. So advancement and future of food sovereignty movement is with the connection of this movement to the scientific socialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nahin. Fabiana, quick word, last message from you.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to say that sovereignty and self-determination from a people for food sovereignty begins to individual self-determination for food sovereignty. It's a contra-cultural agenda. We need to make stronger the ties between rural communities and city communities. And yes, the action is on decision makers' process, influence them, and enhance social cohesion and civil practices in order to us to thrive through chaos. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fabiana. Mariam, can we have your last words? Quickly, Mariam, can you hear us?
Mariam is no longer with us, Ajay.
Okay. So thanks to all the speakers, thanks to Azra, thanks to Fabiana, Mariam, Nahind, thanks to the audience. Can we have the video, please, before we move ahead? Do we have the video from Southern Peasant Federation of Thailand? Yeah.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ องชนชาวไทยแผ่นดินคือชีวิตไม่คิดนำเป็นสินค้าเพื่อลูกหลานฝ่ายข้างหน้าจะรักษาแผ่นดินเอาไว้พืชผลดำรงสายพันธุ์พืชผักแบ่งปันมากมายรักษาวิถีคนไทยลูกหลานจะได้มีใช้นานๆโฉนดชุมชนที่เราทุกคนต้องการแก้ปัญหาหลายด้านมีแนวทางกำหนดเอาไว้แผ่นดินดำรงชีวิตใช้สิทธิ์ผลิตอาหารพี่น้องของเราเบิกบานโดยมีอาหารสำราญใจโดยมีอาหารสำราญใจ
เล็กปัจจัยที่ผลิตก็คือที่ดินถ้าไม่มีที่ดินก็ไม่สามารถผลิตอาหารได้อันปัจจัยแรกทีนี้การปรับพื้นที่ที่เป็นส่วนปาล์มหลายปีมันอะไรก็เหยียบสารอาหารในดินมันน้อยทีนี้เพราะว่าทุนนี้มันจ่ายเคมีปุ๋ยเคมีอย่างมากเลยก็สารพิษที่ขายาแล้วก็สารพิษที่ปนกันบ้ามมันมีแมลงมาทำลายมันใช้เวลาที่ใช้เคมีมานานนี่ต้องมีเหมือนที่ดินเลยที่เหมือนกับที่ดินที่มันมีคุณภาพน้อยพอคุณภาพน้อยเราต้องมาปรับที่ดินถ้าเราไปเพิ่มปุ๋ยเคมีลงไปอีกมันก็ใช้ได้ไม่ยั่งยืนทีนี้ก็ใช้แนวคิดกล้องคนดังเดิมมันดูรุดดังเดิมก็ใช้ปุ๋ยคอกดินมันไม่เทื่อมแล้วอาหารที่เรากินก็มันมีธาตุที่สมบูรณ์ไม่ใช่มีแต่ปุ๋ยเคมีแบบปักไอโปรโคนิติจาน้ำกับแต่ปุ๋ยอย่างเดียวเพราะฉะนั้นก็ที่ดินต้องมีส่วนสำคัญ
So thank you so much for this short, inspiring video. This is by Southern Peasant Federation of Thailand, SPFT, about how the SPFT peasants reclaimed a former oil palm plantation in the province of Surat Thani in Thailand in 2008 and made it productive until today. The SPFT is a member of organizing of the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty. So thank you so much to our colleagues from Thailand. Now we have a very important session on planning strategies, taking synthesis and conclusion. Unfortunately, we have only around 20 minutes for this session. I'll hand over to my colleague from Asia Peasants Coalition, Wali Haider, for this session. Wali, you are welcome and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ajay. I can't open my mic, my video. I'm sorry. So there is.
Can the secretariat help him to unmute his? Open his camera.
Try it now, Wali.
Yeah, it's on now. You can see me, Ajay.
Yeah, we can see you. Please go ahead.
So as the time was too short, I'm directly going to the agenda. Instead of 40 minutes, we only have 20 minutes for discussion on action plan and campaign. So I would ask all the participants, please raise your hand or write your question or comment regarding to the action plan and campaign in the chat box. After this, we will be needing a report here. I would request if someone can volunteer to report this action plan and campaign session for the next 20 minutes. Thank you. I can see no hands. So, friends, it's very important we come up with the action plan and agenda for our future actions, because it's very important, and all the plans and campaign need to be developed by collectively among us. That's why we are asking all of you to please suggest and come up with your suggestion. I can see two hands, Marcos Arana, and then following by Julie Smith. Marcos, floor is yours.
Sí, muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español. Yo quisiera pues señalar que cuando el...
I'm going to talk in Spanish. I would like to say that when the UN General Secretariat yesterday pointed out some of the crises that we have been going through, spoke about how the corporate interests are trying to affect international public policies regarding, for example, food interests and food policies. Despite the great catastrophe that the pandemic has been for many people, it's been a business opportunity for other people. And this is happening because these food problems deriving also from the actual pandemic are affecting the industry as a whole, and they are fostering mass production of food. Obviously, this is also related to the climate change crisis, and we are all aware of the fact that at the UN summit, they would try to scare countries into adopting the more technologically modified seeds and other kinds of products. Governments will not be supporting their own population. This is the idea that they're going to try to sell. And what we need to do is to make people realize that agroecology and our traditional values are those that we need to go back to, and precisely what we need to do is to adopt a new approach. We need to reduce, for example, the amount of greenhouse gases that we are now emitting more and more. And we have to think not only about how important our agenda is, but also about how we must retake the agenda and affect the Glasgow meeting in November. As I say, the greenhouse effect gases that are being emitted are also a very important factor, and we must fight against this fear that is being created amongst governments, trying to convince them to adopt the more technically advanced policies and measures rather than returning to more traditional values and turning to agroecology. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos, for your valuable comments and recommendations. I can see hand of Julie. Julie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wally. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really become clear to me that the struggle for food sovereignty is really going to be a long one. But these really intensive months that we've had working together, preparing the GPS, and this summit itself has really given us the impetus to take it forward. Oh, sorry, I just need to switch off the No, it's okay. So I had a few takeaways that I think will be important for the work ahead. One of the things I think we really need to show that the corporate control of food isn't just a question of taking away farmers' rights to decide on what they produce and what consumers choose, what goes into their stomachs in the end. But it's an attack on a lot more. And I think we need to emphasize the fact it's an attack on people's culture. And I've noticed that in the past years, this feeling is really growing everywhere. And there are initiatives also where I'm speaking from Europe. I know there are a lot of initiatives here where people are showing that they're fed up with, having their food controlled by these big companies. And so I think it'll be important for us as PCFS to try to link up with these people on the ground at the very local level, because this is also going to give us the material we need, the tools to show that this kind of thing is possible. We don't have to be dependent on industrial agriculture and the corporates. And perhaps one other important thing is to show that the corporates are now going much further than trying to control our food, but they're really trying to control every aspect of our life. And the example that was mentioned during the session today, that how the World Economic Forum has influenced the United Nations Food Systems Summit is perhaps just one example, but there are so many. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I have seen earlier hand of Atama. Atama, do you want to talk? Atama? I can see a message in the chat box. We need to challenge FAO for their partnership with pesticide company and corporates through the special report here. Is there anyone who wants to talk and contribute to us our discussion on action plan and campaign?
Yes. Hi, Wally. Thank you so much for giving me a time. From the very critical conversation earlier through Ajay, I can reflect on one thing on the struggle that we have seen from our friends in the north. I'm talking about the water defenders, okay, the water defenders and how the indigenous peoples, the Lakota, struggle using their treaty rights, who are also defending food. They find through their stories that unions have come together with them to fight against the unfair bosses. And these unions, if I'm not mistaken, in other places, not in the Lakota territory, they kind of adopted the Native American way of defending those treaty rights. So I can only draw upon thinking that a defense of the water is something is an idea that we can take on as action planning. My proposal is like how the Amazon, Amazon indigenous peoples and the Borneo indigenous peoples who are in the rainforest, they are defending the jungles, that produce air or oxygen. They are the lungs of the world. So we all have air to breathe. With the air, there's the water, but there is still the very important element, which is the land. And I really like how Julie a while ago said there is an attack on people's culture. So I have a proposal that we can encourage meaningful participation with all our friends in the struggle, and I propose to consider a discussion or an action planning for peace and reconciliation with Mother Earth, land, water, and especially for our food sovereignty struggle. If this is an idea that that can be considered, I'm really thankful for this time to offer some thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I have seen that there is a comment Nahendra made. We need to work more on educating and mobilizing peasants organization and movement. We need to work on to connect food solve to scientific socialism. And is there anyone who also wanted to comment the earlier comment on how FAO is shaking hand with corporation, especially Monsanto, Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I can also see a text suggesting NGOs are a new way of colonization erupted in good intention. And there is another comment establishing local seed center in each and every village. This is for food sovereignty, furthering the food sovereignty campaign. It's very important. Many communities are struggling, saving their seed and making local seed systems. There is another comment. This might be a bit too operational. We need to advocate for revision of land use policies, especially in cities, to allow for regenerative agriculture practice to support urban ecological regeneration. This is because some cities punish citizens for setting up garden in urban areas. These are the few comments I have seen in the chat box. I'm sorry, I'm connected with my cell phone, so it's not easy. Those even who are raise their comment and mention, like Atama, please write in the chat box. There is another comment says community seed banks peasant knowledge, community wisdom are key to agroecology and food sovereignty. Of course, these are very important. And then as an action, we should pursue more collective farming to strengthen community unity. I suppose the reporter is taking notes of these very important, crucial recommendations for future plans. So I can see a hand of Vimala. Vimala, can you turn on your mic?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am from India. I'm only trying to say that it was wonderful being with all of you. One thing I want to say that this very term resources, when people regarding the earth, water, and all these things, this very term actually I feel like is demeaning. And we should dismiss that term and say it as life-giving sources. They are sources. They are sources for us, life-giving sources, not resources that we can exploit as much as we can. So I feel like I advocate that a lot here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimala. I would suggest those, please write your suggestion in the chat box, even those who have been spoken on the mic, so that we can take notes. Please write in the chat box your important suggestion. I also have a comment suggestion from Victor. Besides exposing at opposing the food agrochemical seeds conglomerates, we should also target Gates Foundation, which is a tool for corporatization of agriculture and development. Of course, it's very crucial. We should target the real enemies of farmers and local knowledge producers. is very important. Is there anyone who wanted to share their concern? Otherwise, I'm going on. So it was a very informative session today, starting from opening speech of Azra, who emphasizes on the concept of food sovereignty and its context. She also explains the role of the WTO and their facilitation, towards corporate control. She also talked about fossil fuel-based development and need for organizing the peasant movement. Mariam of APN, elaborated how that the Israeli atrocities been at the grassroots level, which is harming the farmer community, rural community, and the Palestinian society as a whole. And for UNFSS, this is not a matter of concern. The conflict issues are not in their priority. The military control and opposition to that by APN and other Palestinian movements are, of course, well noted. Sabina from Brazil commented in her speech that the new liberal agenda is on in Brazil. The right to food is no more in the agenda for the government. It's always been a charity in Brazil. Even that more than half population of Brazilian are facing hunger. Nahendra has shared how unstable political situation in Nepal and how all the upcoming government are trying to demolish the foods of law and trying to amend the law. And we are again back to the zero in Nepal. The Nepali people's movement made a historical moment, and then yet again we are facing another kind of atrocities in Nepal. And then I would like to thank all the speakers and everyone here joining with us for this very important movement. For us in Pakistan, it's a very historical movement. We participated quite enthusiastically yesterday. Today we had our National Food System Summit. It was great. People are enthusiastic. We are glad we are part of the global movement again, UN Food System Summit, and we will win, inshallah. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wali, and my apologies that we could not give floor to all the people who wanted to make comments, but do punch in your comments and remarks and insights into the chat box, and I hope that organizers are taking note of all of these contributions. Thank you to all of you, to speakers, our participants, for a very interesting, exciting and fruitful discussion on asserting food sovereignty, transforming food systems. And of course, thanks to the wonderful insights on how people's movement can and will push forward this campaign. Thank you also to the organizers, People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, together with Asia Peasant Coalition, Roots for Equity, IBON International, Asia Pacific Research Network, Arab Group of the Protection of Nature, and Arab Network for Food Sovereignty for making this happen. And to the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation for the live stream of this event. Of course, thank you to all who joined us in today's discussion. Tomorrow, same day as the virtual event of the UN Food Systems Summit takes place, Global People's Summit on Food Systems will hold a global protest against the corporate hijack of the UNFSS and the neoliberal solutions it pedals to co-opt the transformation of our food systems in the interest of corporate profit. Together, let's resist the global corporate food empire by joining our on-the-ground and online rally. We also look forward to seeing you once more tomorrow, same time, for the GPS closing plenary, the Speak Out for Just, Equitable, Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems will present the policy recommendations and action plans drawn from the thematic, regional, sectoral and national events, building up to the main event, as well as the 4 pillars of transformation. The declaration for the radical transformation of our food system will also be presented and adopted. Visit hungryforchange.in info and follow at Our Food Systems on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more information and update. Until next time, goodbye to everyone for now and stay safe. Have a safe evening. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, Ajay, Wali.